I'm Bridget, and we have 10 minutes to introduce you, if you don't know already, to the amazing world of the microbiome and Seeding Baby's Microbiome. So I run the Facebook page, Seeding Baby's Microbiome, which I set up because as one of my many roles, I do the news for the International Journal of Birth and Parent Ed. And I kept seeing effects of my baby's microbiome on their long-term health come up. And I've been subsequently working with the makers of the film Microbirth and running workshops and trying to share the science of this amazing difference that we can make to babies if we can get their microbial seeding right at the very beginning. So, if you don't know already, you are possibly a little bit less human than you think you are. Estimates range, but they say that for every one human cell you have, we have between 3 and 10 bacterial cells. So each one of you has in you and on you 100 trillion bacteria, viruses, and fungi. Now, that does sound a little bit gross, I'll give you that, but it's not, it's brilliant. We are each one of us our own little ecosystem. We are each one of us our own planet. And in the same way that on this planet, bits of the planet do different roles. So we call the rainforests the lungs of the planet. And we know that the Arctic circles help protect the rest of the planet by trapping ozone and protecting the water levels. So part of your body, your microbiome, looks after you as well. It is a relationship between host and the creatures that we host with us. So my skin is a little bit dry, a bit like a savanna, a couple of hundred species on there. And these are great, because if I had to touch this counter, and I don't wish to cast aspersions on the people who've been before me, but they could have sneezed into their hand and touched it. Yeah? Somebody might have been to the loo, not washed their hand and touched it, and I just pick all of that up on my hand. Am I worried? No, because the bacteria on my hand, if it's a threat to me, the host is going to deal with it. Now my gut is amazing. My gut is like the rainforest, about 1,000 species of bacteria in there. And they are crucial to the health of me. So your gut bacteria is crucial to the health of the human attached to that gut. It is breaking down the food. It is converting the food to energy. It's extracting the nutrients. And we started to see very strong correlations between the health of the gut bacteria of a human and the health of the entire human attached to that, including their mental health. So they've done a whole series of experiments with sterile mice. So mice that they have bred in complete captivity with no bacteria at all. If you take just the gut bacteria from an obese mouse and put it into our sterile mouse, with no change in diet and with no change in exercise, they will become fat. So it's not what they're eating, it's not what they're doing, it's what their gut bacteria is doing with the food. If you take the gut bacteria from a very anxious mouse, so a mouse you've been terrorizing with a cat or something for a while, and put it into our sterile mouse, with nothing to make them anxious, nothing to frighten them, they will display symptoms of anxiety. So we start to see this very strong correlation between the health and the diversity of your gut bacteria and the health of the human attached. Now, what's significant about this is we recognize that in the Western world, we've lost about 1/3 of the diversity of our gut bacteria. And this suddenly becomes very, very significant when you think that it has all these protective effects on us. So we do know this, that when a gut is in dysbiosis, that it has been linked with, and these are just a few of them. Entertain yourselves this afternoon. Spend 5 minutes on Google and have a look and see what gut bacteria dysbiosis is linked to and how many things, everything from MS to obesity to diabetes. And it's so interesting. In the last 40 years, we've seen a huge rise in non-communicable diseases, haven't we? And one of the possible culprits is the fact that our gut bacteria is no longer as diverse and therefore as protective as it was. So how do you get your gut bacteria? How do we get this amazing ecosystem that populates each one of us? Because we are living in this bacterial world, and every second of every day, you are exposed to trillions of bacteria. I hate to say this to you, but you are sharing bacteria with the people right next to you right now. It's a good thing. It really is. You get it through your mum. This is an entirely maternal heritage. It has been passed down from generation to generation to generation. As babies come down the birth canal, their mother primes them with the bacteria that they need to live in an entirely bacterial world. We are not the most successful species. I know we like to think we are, but bacteria far and away is. So every second of every day you come into contact with trillions, and your body needs to know what is friend, what is foe, what do we attack, and what do we leave alone. And that's the maternal heritage that you get. Because until very recently in human history, almost no babies survived to adulthood unless they'd passed down a birth canal. So what happens, and we see the bacteria in the birth canal changing in the run-up to birth. We know it's having changes intestinally, and that is to provide the right levels of energy in order to fuel growing a baby. But we see a change in the birth canal, in the run-up to birth, to make sure that the right bacteria gets into baby, and that's really important. Think of it as a payload of information about how to survive in a bacterial world. So as babies come down, and as you all know, they don't just pop out, they spend a while in the birth canal, they're getting soaked, and it goes in their mouth, up their nose, and in their ears, and they take on this payload. Fascinatingly, in the last few weeks before they're born, baby's immune system dampens slightly to allow them to take on this payload of bacteria without their innate immune system attacking it straight off. It's flipping genius, really, isn't it? So the process is that babies pick up this bacteria at birth. And many of you may know Dominique Gosbello. Many people know her because she's the lady who did the seeding, the vaginal swabbing exercise. But her whole principle is seed and feed. So it's very important that the bacteria get seeded correctly in the baby at the very, very start to get this right, and then breast milk feeds. The other crucial part of getting it right at birth is ideally that babies come straight on to skin to skin. We have different colonies in different places, and of course one of the things that a baby gets as soon as they come to skin is their external bacteria gets populated with a bacteria that is good for them. And the final piece of the sort of the biological normal process for babies getting seeded is breast milk. Breast milk is a microbial soup. We know that up to a third of a baby's microbes are going to come through in breast milk. So it's absolutely phenomenal source of them. And there has always been that element in breast milk that is non-digestible to babies, which frankly, until quite recently, never made any sense. Why would there be a carbohydrate in there that babies cannot digest? And we know what it is now. It's food for the microbes. To make sure that the right microbes survive and thrive, breast milk provides them with food. I mean, I don't wish to brag, but women, that's just genius, really, isn't it? I mean, look what we can do. We're ace. I do brag all the time, actually, about amazing how our bodies are. The crucial thing about this is it trains the immune system. This is where it starts to get really, really exciting. So the bacteria that gets in there first brings all sorts of really important messages about the trillions of bacteria that this baby will be exposed to day in, day out. And it says, this is friend, this is foe. This is really important because every single day the body has to make a decision about all the trillions it comes into contact with, and it needs to know which ones are good and which ones to leave alone. So if this doesn't get seeded right at first, you can have a body that attacks systematically the wrong things, that overreacts to gluten, that overreacts to peanuts, that is responding badly to the wrong things because the first messages that got in there first weren't the ones that came down from mother to mother to mother to mother to saying this is how you survive in your particular bacterial world. This is a whistle-stop tour in 10 minutes. So this is the biological norm for setting up a baby's microbiome: vaginal birth, skin to skin, and breast milk. What happens when one of those bits isn't there? So, for example, if it isn't a vaginal birth, it's a caesarean birth. Now, if mum's waters have broken, if the baby has been in the birth canal, then there will be some seeding. And as far as we know, a little bit of seeding takes place in utero. And we don't know whether it's through the placenta, whether it's through the cord, whether it's through the amniotic fluid. There's a suspicion that a little bit comes over actually at conception. But we are pretty sure that the main event takes place as baby is born. So what happens when babies do not come down a birth canal, when they're not exposed to bacteria? Well, you see a very different microbiome in these babies. Now, this was a very small study, but there are 7 studies that have also shown a very similar result, or the same result, really. That when babies are born vaginally, when you look at them, when you look at their microbiome and their first poo and the microbiome of the meconium, it's the same as in mum's vagina, which is what we want. That's the primary seeding. When they're born by caesarean, it's more likely to be the skin of people in theatre. Now, I am not knocking caesarean, and I never will. I have 4 children. My eldest was born by emergency caesarean, and I've gone on to have 3 VBACs afterwards. My lovely Alexander might not be alive without caesarean. I will never knock them. But if I had known 17 years ago what I know now about the microbiome, I would have taken so many more steps to protect his. There is no guilt in this, there is knowledge. If we know how to protect the microbiome and we know more about it, we can help protect those babies who need to be born by caesarean. You do see differences in the long-term health outcomes for babies who are born by caesarean. Not all, but there is a 20% higher chance of them having asthma, for example. There's a 40% increased chance of them having autoimmune conditions. There's a 10% rise in juvenile arthritis and things like that. And one of the possible suspects is the fact that their immune system is misinformed at the very, very start. So what we do see is we think this is really, really important. We look at all these ways that we can give babies the best start, but actually their bacterial start is massive. So my 10 minutes today is to say to you, look, get the microbiome in mind when babies are giving birth. The gold standard is a home vaginal birth. You look at babies afterwards, they've got mums, dads, or their parents in home bacteria. Next is a hospital vaginal. They've got parents and a bit of hospital. Caesarean babies, it's almost no parents. So what can you do? So then you're looking at really supporting breastfeeding. You're looking at supporting skin to skin in theatre. You're suggesting things like them bringing blankets from home to wrap around the baby when the baby gets to recovery. So you bring with them home bacteria. Anything that we can do that can protect their microbiome and try and get this programming right at the start. Now, we've got no time to go into this now, but obviously we need to include in this the effect of antibiotics. There's a fabulous TED talk you can go and have a little look at, which shows what 1 dose of antibiotics does on a microbiome and how long that takes to restore itself. So that's one of the things, and it's very hard to separate out what's caesarean and what's the effect of the antibiotics, but we know these have an effect. But it's the mother takes them, and it will alter hers. If she's taking them, but even during birth, it will pass on. But particularly during pregnancy, we see an impact of that as well on baby's microbiome. But also, it's this understanding that the bacteria that gets in first is the primary colonizers. And the hypothesis appears to be standing up quite well that the ones that get in there first are the most significant. So in 10 minutes, I can't show you all the science behind it, but if you can leave here just thinking more about the microbiome and protecting it at birth, then I leave London a happy woman. Yeah, I really, really do. Again, another thing that is really worth investigating is what happens if the thing that you take out is breast milk and the effect that formula feeding is, and we see a vast difference in terms of the microbiome of babies who are formula fed to breastfed. It's interesting that any breastfeeding at all seems to maintain some of that responsiveness, and it's such an amazingly responsive liquid breast milk. It changes as the baby needs. You know, the backwash that babies put back in. Baby breast will be analysing it and releasing the microbes that baby needs at that point. It's really quite remarkable. So lots of information available as well in terms of that. And as with always, I'm always very cautious about anything that can be used to promote guilt. And we all saw Dr. Amy's speech this morning. But it does make a difference. And it's been interesting. I teach in Birmingham, I teach at the Women's, and I teach in the community. And I've been talking about breastfeeding being quite a good thing for 15 years. Nothing has changed behaviour like talking about the microbiome. Nothing. I've never seen anything. I've had women come up to me who say, oh, these are for him. I'm not going to breastfeed. And then they say, but now I am. I get it now. So lots of information about this. Just to be very quickly summarise it up, we know that non-communicable diseases are rising. And a primary suspect in this is altered gut bacteria at birth. We believe, and I believe quite firmly, that seeding it right at birth can have very long-term, very positive effects, not just on babies' physical health, but on their long-term mental health as well. And so if we interrupt that, it has consequences. So everything that you can do as midwives and as birth workers to protect that seeding at birth is really, really valuable for long-term health. Sometimes caesareans are absolutely necessary. They are a good thing. I'm delighted that they exist. But just have the microbiome in mind to make sure that babies get the best bacterial start where possible. And remember, it isn't all set at birth. How you feed babies, how much dirt they're exposed to as they grow up, what you wean them on, all these things have a massive impact. but actually that initial colonization is very, very important. If you want to know more, you can come on a full day, which for student midwives we've tried to make super, super cheap as well. And I'm going to be here now, and if anyone's got any quick questions, because I didn't put my stopwatch on, so I've no idea whether I've talked for 5 minutes or 25. But if anyone's got any questions, you can fire away now.
I was just wondering about water births.
Right.
People are saying that they can deliver out of the water, labour in water, but get out for the bacteria.
No. Very small study, but it does show this, that actually they compared water birth babies with land birth babies and women who laboured in water and then delivered on land, and they found no significant difference in the seeding because the seeding takes place in the birth canal. And that's not underwater. Well, I mean, technically the body is underwater, but do you know what I mean? So actually, when you think about it, you go, well, yeah, of course, actually. So that's good news. Water birth is still on for seeding the microbiome.
Hello, Bridget.
Hello.
Lou from the NCT. Regarding, I know you haven't gone into it, the possibility of women having a vaginal gauze in the vagina during the cesarean. Yeah. Because the studies haven't been, well, the published results don't seem to be widely understood, and then the group strep argument, are you finding that midwives and obstetricians will support a woman's decision to do that?
Okay, so if we don't know what that is, Dr. Gloria that we saw before, who did the study comparing the different babies, had a proof of concept study, thinking if some babies need to be born by cesarean, which they do, perhaps we can restore, or at least partially restore, the microbes into them. So before the women went in for cesarean, there was a piece of gauze folded like a fan for maximum surface area, inserted into the vagina for about an hour. And then after birth, the first thing that these babies saw was Dr. Gloria coming at them, and they sucked them over her face, in their mouth, and basically smeared them all over to try and replicate the coming down the birth canal. It was only 9 women in this study. But it doubled the good bacteria that babies had. Now, to be clear, the women in that study had been tested for STDs, they've been screened for group strep B, bacterial vaginosis, the whole thing. Yeah? So they were a very specific group. The study is, last time I checked, they were even still recruiting for this. It's a massive longitudinal study. But so far, there have been no adverse outcomes from it. So to begin with, this was publicised. Lots of people started vaginal swabbing in order to populate their babies if they know that they needed to have a planned caesarean. Now, the British Medical Journal came out with a statement that suggested that we shouldn't do this because you might inadvertently pass on something like group strep B, that if you're swabbing a woman and you pass it on, who knows what you could pass on. And this again made headlines. What didn't make the headlines was the responses in the British Medical Journal, which I subscribed to and I saw. And babies come down birth canals all the time of women who we don't even know have group strep B, and it is present and they are just fine. But it's the deliberateness of it. It's the deliberateness. Do you see what I mean? And we do know we live in a society where midwives and obstetricians are sued. And if you swabbed a baby and they got something like group strep B, then it would be a difficult case to answer. So they have said that parents are welcome to do it themselves. They don't recommend that hospitals do it. They haven't said that they can't, and they've said that parents can do it. But they do recommend that if parents do it themselves, that if the baby should become poorly, that they let their caregivers go. Because the argument is that parents who've had a caesarean, you wouldn't necessarily be looking for group strep B, which I don't think is true because we know they can get them in utero. So do you see what I mean? But that's the argument for that. So it's not a no. But it's not, and fair enough, with one proof of concept with 9 women, you can't say this is a way to go. But that's why, and that's hopefully that argument. It's the thing everybody focuses on, and it's a bit of a red herring. What's better practice is having gentle caesareans, thinking about skin to skin, really helping that first feed be a breastfeed if you can. Because if you think about it, if babies are born by caesarean and their first feed is formula, where do they get their microbes from? Where do they get it from? Maybe peer-to-peer support, maybe donor milk if there isn't the availability of something. And there was that fantastic study very recently whereby you could take donated milk, and you know it's pasteurised, of course, isn't it, if you have it from a milk bank, which means that you've lost a lot of the live microbes. But if you put a few drops of the birth mother's milk in, within a couple of hours, it will have repopulated to match the birth mother's microbes. I know! Honestly, I've got goosebumps just thinking about it. It's so exciting. Yeah? Not that I'm enthusiastic or anything, no. Any more?
On that same subject, if a woman says going to bottle feed, and they sometimes say, which I've heard them say, oh, can I give a drop of colostrum? I usually say yes. Would that be sufficient? Because I just say, take out a little drop, put it on with your finger if they won't take it, because I don't want to give the breast.
Yeah.
So
well, it will
that
help.
would do the same thing.
Well, it will help. It's
yeah,
microbes,
it's better than
isn't
not doing it. Yeah,
and
you
have to think in terms of where do they get their microbes from.
Yeah.
And it's a very new human experiment. There are babies who've been born by planned cesarean, formula fed from the day they are born, and when it comes to weaning, their parents crack open a jar. Where is their programming coming from? There, and that's a long-term study that we don't know, because that's so recent. That is so recent. Yeah. So it would all help. Every bit of microbes is a good thing. Any more? I'm being told I have to stop anyway. Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.